welcome back to CRCOA's Behind the Groove seminar. I am Ben Kliever, and I will once again be taking you through another lesson tonight. Hope everyone is doing well. Feel free to introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat as we go along. Today we are going, what's up Corey, what's up Matt, what's up Errol, how are y'all doing? Well, glad to see y'all back in here. Today we're going to be talking about using groups and clips in our session in both the mix and the edit window. So we're really going to dive in and talk about why we use clips. We're going to talk about how to create them, what the real big benefits are to using using groups, because it's going to make our life a lot easier. Then we're going to take some of that, and we're going to take some of the group functions and use them in action and show you why we would make groups. It's going to make the big thing with groups is what it just does. It just makes you way more efficient and way easier for you to control your session and control everything inside of Pro Tools. So we're going to dig into all that action when we're talking about groups. As for the clips, we're going to go in and we're going to talk about all the functions in clips so y'all can really, cut up, know how to manipulate any clip into what you need for your session. So that is going to be the main things that we're going to be looking at tonight is those functions. These are super helpful, and it's something I use groups constantly all the time. You can even see even in this little section here that I already got, when we're going to talk about this window here in a second. In a standard session, it is not odd for me to have the entire alphabet completely filled up here with that many groups, because I group all sorts of stuff all the time to help control different things, and we'll really get into that. This session that we have in here, what's up Cody, what's up Michaela, glad to see y'all are here. So if we look at, let's take a quick look at the session I have here. This is a session that I just, one that's in the works with one of me and my buddies. We kind of write not really, this is more cinematic stuff that we're writing when we do this. So it's, more things that you could put behind some sort of image or movie or video or something like that. So just really kind of crazy movements and lots of synths, but we got lots of guitars and drums and sorts of stuff in here too. So I'll just kind of let y'all get a little bit of, just get a little bit of just kind of seeing what's all in here. So we have drums, which is this whole section over here. Then we got our bass section. I got some flutes, we got some pads. Then we also got some, I got my guitars all at the end here. Then we got some very spacey kind of sounds, and then some strings, and then all the guitars that I've tracked to this thing. So that's kind of what's going on in this session. So let's we're gonna go ahead and start creating some groups. We'll do just a little bit of listening and just kind of go into this just a little bit. Getting a feel for what we got going, because we're going to start doing some groups and controlling in here. Cool, so I just want to give you just a little bit of taste, just kind of what we're listening to tonight, just so we're, it's a little bit mix up from what we've kind of done on some of this other stuff. So even though this is going to be more about groups and clips. So let's go ahead and let's dive straight into talking about groups. This is going to be, I use groups like crazy, so I love doing this. I love using them. I think it's something you should be utilizing. If you're not using them as much, then hopefully after you see this lesson, you get a little more inclined to start using them more in your sessions or in your mix work, just because it's just going to make everything that you're doing much easier. So first thing we're going to talk about is just why are we going to use groups in the first place. And the main reasons why we're using groups to start out is to, number one, it's the main thing with a group is you're able to control multiple tracks, multiple faders, multiple controls all at once by having a group of something like this turned on over here. And we're about to create a group, and we're gonna talk about the groups window and really dive into all this stuff over here. I just kind of wanted you to give an overview of what all it can do. So beyond being able to control the whole fader section and all these buttons that are in our tracks, we can also control multiple plugins together. We can control multiple sends. We can control, so that's where it kind of more, I mean, even with color coding where I have groups, I mean, I have all these things grouped together, and then we'll make, and I have all these groups together, and then we'll really dive in and make sure all that is good. So first, we're going to talk about just making a group, and then we'll talk about the actual groups window once we have it here. So I'm going to make a group first that's just all my guitars over here. So I'm going to call this we'll just call it guitars. I don't need a thing that big. So I'm just going to call this guitars. And once I'm in this, like all the channels that I just grabbed right here, like these are the ones I highlighted. When I hit Command G, that is what's going to create this groups window right here. And this is where we can name our group. This is deciding, like, if you wanted to get so specific in deciding like if a group is attached to the mix window or the edit window. I mean, almost 99.9% of the time, you're almost always should be on this mix edit because it's just so much easier. The whole point of you creating a group is for you to be able to have these pieces together when you're switching between different timelines and moving stuff around, that they're working together. So that's the big, that's the main thing that we're like. That's another, like, so just mix and edit is what you want to stay on really in this area. So whenever you create a group, default wise, it checks this box, which is follow globals, which is what this tab is right here, which we're about to look at here in just a second once we talk about tracks. You can see that when I created the ones that I selected over here, it moved these 4 tracks directly into what is currently in the group. Now what's over here to the left on the available side is the rest of the tracks that are in my session. So this is all the other tracks that are in my session that are currently not in this group. So this is just kind of a quick overview of what we're looking at inside the full group window. We're going to talk about attributes here in a minute, but what we want to see here with the globals section and all this part is that this is what's like this is automatically controlling when you have in this group every time you have globals. So let me try to explain this a way that's easier to say than me just saying globals. So no matter what, when you initially create a group, as I said, this is how it defaults. It opens up and it has checked globals. So basically this is just like an overall rule that when you have globals checked, any group that you make that has this follow globals box checked, it is following whatever you have checked in this box. So inside our actual globals units here, we can see all the different things that we can control with a group. So we have the first 2 things that are always here that are the main 2 things is volume and mute. And that's so, like, let me go ahead and just click OK on these groups for just a second, just because, so when I have volume and mute, now that I have guitars on these groups, it changed this. It created the guitars group over here to the left side of my groups window. It also puts a name on our group right here. But now whenever I actually move one of these knobs, it moves all of them together as a group. So now I'm just going to put them back where they were at. And then we're going to go back into the groups window and look into that. Also, so it also controls all your mutes and all these buttons, but we have to make sure that we have all that checked. So if you need to change something that's on a group from what you've used before, you can right click directly on the group and click modify, and then it gets us right back to that group window, so we can control whatever we want this window to do. So back into our global section, just so we can talk about that again. Volume and mute is something you're always going to want to have, just because that's one of the main things you're going to want with your globals. Usually whenever you come into a default setting, it's usually going to look like this, where we have volume and sends on all tracks, and then mute and sends on all the sends for all the tracks as well. And then you'll see solos, and then you'll see solo checked most of the time too, and automation mode. Now, when I'm creating a group, I usually always come in and I check the record enable and the input monitoring controls as well, which I do that because, again, once I'm in the group, click OK here. Now whenever I'm inside this group, if I was recording a whole set of drum tracks or doing multiple guitars at once, I only had to click record. Oh, I don't have inputs on here, so hold up one second. Let me just put an input on all these, so it just at least lets me. So at least lets me just turn on record enable. Because if you don't have an input on the track, it's not going to let you do record enable. So now that I have that in there, I just want y'all to see every single one of these controls the record, the input monitor, the solo, and the mute if we turn them on. And just like our hotkeys on individual tracks, we can control that from our keyboard, just like Shift R for record, Shift I for input, Shift S for solo, and Shift M for mute. So we can quickly control all those buttons really fast with hotkeys and from having a group. Okay, so let's look in here one more time. Now, sends here, whenever we have a send on in like where we have the send level controls, like let's say we were sending, like we were gonna use this for our headphone sends, for example, or it was something you were sending to a delay or a reverb. What the send end is doesn't matter. I just want y'all to actually see what the send's gonna do to a group whenever it is here. So let me grab the output here. Oh, I still have some older. But let's just say I was putting a bunch of headphone sends up here with this group. And since I have all the sends set to control, where it's send A, B, C, and we have level and mute, then that way, whenever we're moving on one of, like you see, like when I move one, it's automatically moving the other ones. Like I don't have to move any of the other stuff. Also, if I'm trying to just mute or not hear the send on any of those, the second I command click or just do any of the mute functions on the send, it's gonna control everything. Now, pre-fader, we still have to do that with option click to make it go to everything, but the fact that we can easily turn a send or control a send or control automation exactly the same for anything in the group, that's really convenient for us on that. And since we have all the sends checked on that way we are in complete control of that. Now I'm gonna make another send here. I'm gonna make another group, I mean, not another send. So make sure my other ones are all here, and they are cool. So now what I'm gonna do is I have a few different tracks here. I have an electric guitar 1, electric guitar 2, which I have panned far left and right. Then I have some electric guitar fills that are filling in the middle when I'm not going stereo wide. And then I have like I have one that's still a mono track, but now it's in a stereo track because I have put a stereo reverb directly on this track to make it have the sound that it's doing. And so that was on purpose, but that's why this one's panned out. So I want to group these two together because this is something that I'm going to do in sessions very regularly. If I know that I have like my two main rhythm tracks, and I know those are going to be left and right, I'm going to group those as my, as my rhythms, so they're together and I'm processing them the same, which is what we want to do if we're trying to have a big wide, just big left and right. So I'm going to make another group on top of this one, and you can see automatically I'm creating a new group right now, and it's already opening the exact same window before, the create group window, and it has all the same globals because that's what it's defaulting to. So I'm going to call this rhythms, and now when I click OK, it's now created a rhythm track down here. We can always move this. So we have now created our groups for that. So let me open my rhythm track here. So now I want to dive in a little bit more. So automatically this is going into where now this is a smaller control of this section. Now I want to talk to you about something real quick before we dive back into this window, just because now that I have two different groups, I want y'all to see what we're looking at over here. So just in the naming region, anything that has a group, you'll see. I don't want to do this out of order because there's so many little things that add up to each one of these little groups. So I just want to make sure I'm going in the best possible order to describe this. So we'll dive into that here in 1 second. I want to show you what you can do. I'm going to pick just these rhythm tracks. And now let's say we'll finish up on this window and then we'll dive into the other groups section and into what you're actually looking at on your individual tracks. But when we're in this groups window here, like I said, globals before are just a world, is like a session rule for anything that you have globals checked. Now let's say I want to have specific controls for what I'm doing on an individual group, but I don't want it to operate that way on another group. I would want to uncheck follow globals here. So now this group is no longer following anything that is happening in the globals section. And now we can actually look at the attribute section. Like you see, like when I have follow globals checked and you click on attributes, this part's grayed out. Second I uncheck it, now this section is opened up to me and I can actually go in here and choose what I want, exactly everything I want this group and this group alone to do. So one of the things I always want to do volume and mute, so I have control of that. If I want to control the sends, you can go down and click each one individually, but if you just want to do it fast and you want to get the whole thing here, we can just option click on the top one and it's going to fill all our levels and then fill all our mutes with the exact same thing. So now with these rhythms, since there may be times I want to process them the same on the individual track, and let's say that's something I want to do. So I'm going to add an EQ before this, and I'm going to put that in insert slot B. So if I go over here on the inserts and I hit both of the controls for insert slot B just for this group, that's what I'm selecting. I'm going to turn on all these two, my solos, my automation mode, my record enable, and my input monitoring. So I have all those controls as well still on in individual groups. It's just something I like to be on top of with that. So now that I've created this group and I've also made the insert setup where I've controlled the inserts, I showed you we can control sends when we have those boxes checked inside the groups window. And now I want to show you how to use it on inserts. So let me open up an instance of EQ on here. I'm just going to pick a Pro Q out here. And then I'm going to use this exact same Pro Q and I'm going to copy it over to the right side. So with the group enabled, let's say I was listening to this guitar track. I'm just going to go over here and just pick one of these parts and we're just going to solo the guitar for just a second. Oh, I can't. This is in my way. I can't scroll back any farther. So we got a guitar track here. So like, let's say if I'm just working on I'm going to do this just so it's super audibly hearable what I'm doing here. You'll notice that even though I'm only working with one plugin, it did the exact same cuts to each plugin because now I have my group set up where I am controlling inserts on insert B. So when I go back into my rhythm group and I look inside this and I look at my attributes, I have insert B checked. So anything I do in there is going to be the same. So like if you want to do the same thing even in like a Slate digital group, let me go. I need to let me close all these. But even if you had all these same things in a Slate digital group, now you'd want to, anytime that you're working with plugins inside where you're trying to do these like these double group scenarios, you need to copy the exact one you put on the left over to the right, and then any move you do at that point will make both plugins operate exactly the same. So this works with channel strips too, just like in Slate, as long as you set up the whole instance before it. If you know you're going to use a preamp and a virtual channel and an EQ and then something else, or you're using a compressor, and it doesn't matter what you're using in there. Just if you're going to be processing them both at the same time, you just want to get them set up where it's a copy left from right, and then they will work together while you're doing that. But I wanted you to see that no matter what, even if I was over here and I did some big crazy cut over on this side, if I cut back over to the left side, it's doing that same thing. Same thing, I can just click on one plugin and then it'll cut it all out. So and just for like automation purposes, like let's say I'm gonna add another thing down here. So like let's say you were just going to be cutting like the volume on each one of these. You know, now I'm on volume, you see how it's grabbing both of my automations underneath this. So if I move that, I'm just going to drop it just a tad and we'll move it back. But you can see when I have the automation in the group, it automatically controls the whole group. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that automation just because I just want y'all to see that. Okay, so that for the most, let me make sure I've gotten over everything that I need to tell y'all about the groups window here. Okay, just another thing so y'all know, I'm gonna go pull up one more thing from the groups window here because there's another thing I want to talk to you about. But if you do ever want to do a preset save, like let's say you have type of attributes that, I mean, most of the time I just come in here and check it because it's so fast, and it's session to session absolutely could be case by case depending on what you're doing. But if, let's say you wanted to have a bunch of different settings in here for like the group that you're using, like, hey, I want this group to be something here. You can click on the one here, or like when I click on the one here, unfortunately it's gonna clear what's up here. But then like if you went over here and I clicked all this and, you know, then I press save, it'll let me choose what group location that I want it in. And then once it's saved to that group location, then like even if I click 2 or go back to 1, you know, now my settings are just immediately saved there. So just so y'all know, this section is down there and you can do that. So like if I wanted to update it, oh, I forgot to add recording able and input. Now if I press save on 1 again, it'll still have, when I come back to it, it'll have the record able and input. So that is how you can make your own save groups as well on here. So hopefully everyone is comfortable with that so far. So we've used it to control inserts. I've showed you how to control sends. We've controlled main volume. We've controlled mute. We've controlled record enable, input, the solos. I've showed you we can control automation. So here's already a bunch of really big things that we can use a group for. That's really nice for that part. So I'm going to go ahead and just click OK on this and save that area. Now I want to go over here because I printed a little bass track over here earlier. And if you see, I don't have a bass track still sitting right here on this new bass amp that I have. And I was like, oh man, I must have missed this group over here. So what do I do? So if I go over to my bass group over here and modify, when I go into tracks, I'm looking to see what's in here. Bass amp was an old one that was in here. So I made a commit, which is what this is here. I'm gonna add this, so anything you wanna add from this group, you can just, once it's highlighted, you can go over here, click add, boom, and it's in the group. If you didn't want something like this old bass amp's like, oh, I didn't wanna have this in here. Now I can just click remove, and that's no longer in my group. And then the second I press OK, now we see that this is now in the group, and these two are functioning with each other. So that is what we wanna see from that section of the group. So now we'll move into the groups. That's the group window. So if y'all do have any questions over anything in the group window, whether it be the track section, which is all the tracks in there, attributes, which you can control when the follow globals is off and you're working with an individual group only. And then globals is your overall rules that controls any group that has this check mark on it. So, okay, so that is our group window. So if y'all have any questions on that, please ask and I will answer them. But now I'm going to go ahead and move on and talk about the group section over here. So the group section is what pops up after we've created our groups. We saw these guys fill up over here and appear each time they're going through. Now, if you've noticed, next to each group is a letter. And this is the quick key when you have this A to Z mode on. Just like when we're in the mix window, when you have the A to Z mode on over here and you have single button, like for like things like Zoom, RNT and things like that, when you're in the mix window, it usually defaults to have the A to Z on your group section, which is great. So if we looked at like our drum group right here, all these, if I press A, if I press A on my keyboard, now it unhighlights my whole drum section. So when something's highlighted in this bluish gray color over here, that means the group is on. And what you will see when the group's on, like, see you have no group over here, it looks blank, there's no color in this line. There's a color next to the A here when I click on drums. It then fills the color in up here on this line and then tells you what the group is and then puts a letter next on top of that group. And that letter is what your hotkey is for turning it off and on. So I'm just hitting A right now and it's turning my groups and it's turning my drums off and on. So you can see I have groups for each instrument section here, flute pads, you know, scream synth, some of the space dust sounds, what we were calling it, and then strings and electric guitars and all my different drum pieces that I was going from there. So what else in this section I want to talk about other than just hotkeys of being able to turn this off and on is that we have and color coordination as well. So if y'all notice, like I'm just going to thin this group a little bit because there's just a lot of tracks in this session. You can see that as I go across flute, they have different, like each one of these each group has a little different color that's above it as well, and then has an actual name that's showing up under it too. If there's no group, it's just going to be blank and say no group. So this is something that's very much in your face and lets you see what's happening there. And just if anyone's asking, just curious, like what I'm using there to condense my session is Option Command M when I'm in the mix window, and it just folds in all your tracks a little bit smaller, and then just the same key Option Command M again to make them back to full size. So that's just the overview of looking at groups on your tracks. Now you may look at this and see all of a sudden you're like, hey, how come some of these groups have a capital letter and some of these groups have a lowercase letter? So what the capital letter means there is a larger group that is controlling more tracks, and there's a smaller subgroup that is underneath that. So like on these that have a lowercase a, like this kick over here, like if I, just because I have the kicks off, if I turn the kicks back on over here, like if I turn the A off, like where it has capital, and then the subgroup under it has a lowercase a. Now if I didn't have that other group on underneath it, see how this group is the lowercase a? When I turn it off, it just goes to no group. But then if I look at one that has an uppercase A, that means that there is another group on underneath this as well. So when I turn off A, the capital letter is going to go away, and it's going to switch to whatever the group is that's underneath it. So I have a toms group as well that's active on all my toms. So that's a lowercase k, and that's what you're looking at when you see lowercase and uppercase letters on each one of these tracks when you see a group on there. So it's just something that's really easily and quickly noticeable whenever you're looking at it. So you're looking at it, you're like, oh man, I have capital letters, so I must have some other group going on there. Now that is that section of that. Now next to over here, there's actually another, there's all these little small things that are telling you different information. So there's just a lot of little things to go over on this. So if you look over here on the drum groups symbol, so if let's say I clicked, like you see right here when there's an open circle, that means some of the numbers of the group are selected. That means if I have one thing selected inside a group, like see how this circle popped up on drums and on kicks when I clicked on the kick, that means this is highlighted, the highlighted track is inside these three groups. Now if I selected like an entire drum, like the entire drum track, you'll see that it lights up a lot of stuff too, and some of these actually have a black dot inside the middle too. And what that black dot means is it means that that entire group is within this is highlighted at that current time. So now that I've turned all clicks off, you saw every single dot or circle disappeared over here. And actually something that's really quick, if y'all didn't know, like if you have a full group already selected, if you go right to the left of this and I just click where that dot should be, it automatically selects every track that's inside that group for me automatically without having to go grab them. So when you're looking at this, so drums with the black circle on here means that it has every single thing inside that group is selected. If I unselected one of these groups, now this switches to a circle because not every single thing is selected in there. And same thing happened to the snares. Anyone that has a circle and the dot means that part of a group is there, and then also other groups are there as well. So circle means part of the group's highlighted, dot in the middle means all the groups highlighted. Okay, now the last other thing I want to talk about over here, you can technically, just if you didn't ever want to use Command G, you can do all this over here. This is where you can click on actually, like if you want to make a new group from your hand over here. Now, this is another question some of y'all may ask, because I've actually had some of y'all actually ask me this before. If you have a group and you can see you have these groups and they're highlighted, but you can see them highlighted over here, but all your tracks are grayed out. This means that you have deactivated all your groups in Pro Tools. And I mean, your groups are not gonna work no matter what you do until you reactivate them. So like, even though I'm pressing A and you can see I'm turning this group off and on, it's still not changing on my actual mix window. So one way you can do that is to come over here and actually uncheck suspend all groups, or we can use our hotkey, which is Shift Command G. So really quick again, Shift Command G just lets us activate and deactivate all groups. Just as a default, if y'all didn't know, this all group here does select just everything that's in a session. So you see that? Now it just went all across everything in the whole session. So that is what the all group is going to do. Without clicking on it, you can also just do Shift 1, because that's how you get to an exclamation point, right? Is you hit Shift 1, and then it also turns on your, and this is the one time, you know how before I tell y'all every number correlates to the numbers pad over here for all your hotkeys, except for these type of symbols that are actually on above the numbers on there. So if you see an exclamation point or an @ symbol or a number symbol, which you can get that, like if you go too far, if you make enough groups, it's possible for those to show up down there. You just have to put a shift in front of that, and then it's turning like a shift, and then hit the one that has that button up above it. So I'm going to turn the all group back off with Shift 1, since that's the exclamation point. And overall, that is groups in a whole. Let me make sure I have explained everything for you on that, because I want to make sure y'all are feeling really good about that. Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to show y'all with groups. So let me open this back up. So let's say instead of doing automation, or you want to control the automation from one fader, like on this guitar group over here. Let me turn my guitar groups on with R and S over here. Same thing, you can see I have a subgroup over here where I have the rhythms. So when I turn all my guitars off, the rhythms are still sitting below that. But let's say I wanted to automate this whole section and or automate multiple, like automate the volume for a whole section here, but I didn't want to have 4 automation lanes open for my guitars instead of having like automation on every single one of these, like I showed y'all before. Like if I have a bigger group, like where there's 4 of them there or not, I'm likely going to go to, I like to use VCAs, and all VCAs stands for voltage control amplifier, and basically it's just going to be a clean volume level, but you have to select it to a group. So for me I'm going to go ahead and create a new track, which is Shift Command N, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to select the VCA master. You see there's no processing here. It's just going to be like just kind of like when we talked about MIDI on the piano. This is the one function VCA master does. So when I create it, you'll see it says no group here. So now if I go over here and I open up, I should be able to select the group that I want this VCA to go to. Let me see. So now I can go up here, select group, and I want this to control all my guitars. So let's say I wanted this to control, or I had a group on all good. Like let's say I just wanted it to control now we'll just have it control all of them just so y'all can see what it's doing, because I just want y'all to know. So I'll do it on rhythms, never mind. So now that I have this set to rhythms only, now I can just automate one fader and it's going to move my rhythm track however I want. So I use this for kind of more mass section automating. Like after I've gotten everything fine-tuned where I want my levels between all my different tracks, I'll usually go in and make a VCA that can control that whole group, and then any automations I need to do to move the entire section around, instead of trying to grab the whole group and make sure I have that whole thing, all I got to do is just look at this one track on my VCA, and it's like, oh cool, I just want to automate this one section right here, right? So then you're going to see it's actually going to, I'm going to make it just enough where you can actually see the move. So like if I add the volume back over here, you see how it puts this little blue line over here in the automation section? It puts the blue line instead of an actual dip, because like an actual automation dip would look like it actually drew it, right? But when it's the VCA doing the movement for you, you're going to see this little blue line underneath instead of the actual line moving, but the automation is still going to happen. So that's just that's the VCA working to move, and let me get a little closer just so y'all can see it move on the other screen. So just having the VCA move, it's just a really quick way to have automation happen. So I like, that's the function they have. You can see they have no inserts, they have no sends, you're not doing any processing with them. It's just a group control. Now, if you had a bunch of controls underneath it and you had a VCA controlling them and you wanted to record, like when I go over here, it tries to record the whole group, but if I just hit record on this, then it'll only, freezing on me. me turn off my other group. But you see, like once I hit that, then it allows the control of the VCA to turn on to be recorded. So I just want y'all to see that. Now if I actually go, I want to show y'all real quick, just because you can see there's actually a spot where y'all can see this inside the window as well. Like you see how, oh, VCA, cool. Like so you can actually go in and label all these VCAs, and you can go in and select them where they can even control more than one group if you wanted them to, because we could go in and, if I went in and selected base 2 over here, clicked modify on the base. I thought I could make it go to 2 groups, but I guess I was wrong. So never mind. Sorry about that. But it's really easy to make a new VCA, so it's best for groups like we're doing there. So that is the overview of what I would do with groups and all the different processing and how I can handle those in sessions, and using VCAs for automation. So if anyone has any questions about groups as we move on, because we're going to start talking about clips now, and we're going to be dealing more with clips in our edit window. And so that's going to be the next move there. So any questions that trickle in about the groups window, I'll go back to. So now we're going to talk about a clip. So a clip is any audio section, any audio file or MIDI file in our. It could technically be a video file in here as well, but it's any file you have in your edit window where there's information. So each one of these little things is a clip. Every single cut that you have in your session is a clip. And those are the things when we talked about when we were doing vocals, we wanted to crossfade and make sure all our edges are all clean, so everything's super smooth. I'm going to do some extra cuts here just to do some exaggeration on this. So we have a few different things. We talked about zooming in and doing clip gain. So remember, we can zoom in from either right here on this part of our window to get the clip gain zoomed in a little more. We can do that same thing over here, or we have a hotkey that's super useful. That is Option, Command, bracket, left and right, allows us to zoom in really quickly. And this is not changing gain. This is just changing our zoom level of what we're looking at. And then if you get to the point where you're like, I'm not sure where the size of the clip actually is, to turn it back to normal, just do Control, Option, Command, and left bracket, and then everything goes back to its default clip size. So that's just a quick overview of changing the sizes of clips, because zooming and like if you need to see some more information, like where you're really trying to get in and get on the front of a waveform, which sometimes you may be, because we can get so far in that we're in this far into a waveform and actually looking at where we have different peaks and where the initial start is. So, well, an aux, Corey asked, what's the difference between an aux input and a VCA master? You cannot do any processing on a VCA. We can't add an insert, you can't add a send. It's not, a VCA is also not summing them together. Like it's not putting in, like, when you create a bus, like for this, like this situation here, when I'm padding these, like they're getting kind of summed together right here into one thing. When you're sending to an aux, like as a send, you're just you're sending that track where you have the regular track itself, and then you're sending it to another piece, like a delay here. So then you're just kind of sending the signal in 2 different places. A VCA is solely just a voltage controlled amplifier, which is volume automation. That is the only thing it does. That's the only function for a VCA is that you would be using it for volume and automation within a group. That is the sole function of it. That you're not going to do any processing, and you're not trying to create as a bus or do any summing. You just want to be able to automate from one knob instead of, because this is just 2 guitars. Like, I mean, what if I had 8 guitars going right now? Now it's way easier for me to automate 8 guitars from one switch than trying to automate 8 different switches. So this is really, I only use VCAs in mixing, so it's all a post thing. And so but it's really great for, I mean, I guess I'll use it like there's a thing called a DCA on a live mixer that I'll use too, and I'll put them in groups, and then I just, control like the whole drum group from one knob, just like this. So that's the main thing. So hopefully that helped. Thanks, Corey. Now that we have, now I'll get back to talking about the clips over here. So we had talked about zoom. That was the first part we wanted to talk about on clips. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is our clip gain. So let's say we were trying, like either something was too hot, like if something got clipped, or it was too, like this is actually changing how loud and how gritty the clip is. So let me just solo this one right quick. Can't see over here. I'm going to pull my groups window up a little bit more so I can see this. I want to turn that rhythms group off. Just so y'all know, you can always you can access your groups from both windows, just so you know. So, so now I'm clipping it. So there's just a fader that lets you move your clip gain around for whatever you need. Now there's a hotkey that I use all the time because most of the time, I mean, we're usually moving in like half dB or 1 dB clip intervals most of the time we're doing this. So really quick way hotkey is if you're doing Control Shift on the clip you have selected, and on this scenario, like I'm gonna turn my group back on because I want them to operate together. So let's say we had this whole group here and they're at 0 dB and I'm like, oh, this stuff's too hot. If I heard Control and Shift, up and down arrow is gonna bring down my clip gain. You see it's moving by half dB increments. And then, or if I need to go up, it's just holding Control and Shift and doing up and down arrow allows me to quickly change my clip gain from any section. So usually, like, so if I was trying to do something really quick, like, I mean, obviously I'm not gonna do that on this stuff, but let's say like if you were like, this wouldn't be a thing that I would do, but just like if I was going through and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. There's that section. Now I want to, move this one down a little bit. I can go through and automate my clips pretty quick and move this around without ever having to even leave my keyboard, which makes you operate really fast. So that's, and this is something I use in sessions, in tracking, in mixing. I mean, that's something I'm using like all the time. So that it's very useful to be able to know how to move your clip gains and stuff around really, really quickly, especially from hotkeys like that. Even if you don't have hotkeys, like I said, you just come grab the fader here and it's really easy to move those around. Another thing too, just because I just wanted y'all to know, if you ever need to rename a clip section or something's renamed weird, like this thing says EG01, like if I grab on this section, let me get off the group here so I'm just inside this one clip. Like if I double click on a name, now I can, I could label this whatever I want. Like I'm at the palm muted break, I could call this palm muted break guitar or something if I wanted to. And I do that, then you can rename your clip, and like if you wanted to get that specific on labeling clips for some reason, you can absolutely do that. I just wanted you to know. I can still Command Z and go back to normal though. So just anytime if you need to relabel anything or rename anything, you can do that very, very, very easily by just double clicking right on there and renaming that. On clips too, crossfades and fades is something you always want to do. So at the edges, you see we have crossfades, which hopefully y'all have been used to doing that a little bit. And then when you come in the middle here, we actually have the X that lets us crossfade in between those as well. And then I showed y'all the quick way that if you grab a whole section of these, press Command F, it opens up your batch fade window, and then you can decide exactly how you want your fade to look. You can make that, you can make these exactly however you want them to be, how long you want the milliseconds to be. We have complete control of that. I'm not going to crossfade because I'm going to bring that all back here in just a second. One more thing before we go into one other clip thing, just over here, this is our clips bin. Clips bin is where every clip that you have recorded or created or cut, because when you cut stuff, you see it like creates new little clips too. So it'll start just filling this thing all the way up with all these groups. And really, you don't want to, getting into the clips window is usually if you're in trouble or you lost something. So hopefully you're really not ever having to be in this clips window. But just so you know it, like let's say I lost like a hi-hat track or lost some little flute, like I know these are going to be big, but let's say like I grabbed like, the overhead right here or whatever, like I can physically drag out, this clip of whatever this little thing was. So we can always pull out clips from our clip window. I just wanted y'all to be aware that that is there, and you open it with this little arrow. I usually have this closed most of the time because like I said, usually if I'm in this window, it's because I'm having to pull something back out that I accidentally deleted or lost or something. So that's the clips window. It's kind of the place where you can really save yourself on that. Let me see, before I dive in, then we're gonna talk about clip groups here. Let me make sure I got that. How about clip section, the zooms, the gains, the renames. If none of y'all have any questions about that, that is fine. So now you see I put a bunch of cuts here in this section, and this is just on purpose so I have some, so I have some stuff to grab. This is something that's very effective when you have groups that are all cut up and you're trying to move your whole, like you're trying to move your session around. So let's say in this scenario, I have all these pieces and I keep having to, you know, move them around like a bunch of places in the session. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to duplicate this out farther out here so I don't have to deal with what's already sitting here. How do I put the clip to original timestamp? Okay, let me open that and show you. This is what John's asking here is he's asking me to show y'all how, like, let's say you did lose a clip from one of your sessions and you do find the right audio clip that you needed and you pull it out, but you're like, man, I'm not exactly sure where this was sitting in my session. And that can be a real pain. Like, I can be a real pain in the ass if you get a thing out there and you're like, now I got the file, but now I got to go line it up somewhere in this track. And let's say this is like a jazz track or an orchestral track and there's no click track and you're like, you know, how do I line this up and where exactly did this land? I can go in there now and I can grab, hopefully this doesn't go crazy whenever I pull one of these things out because I'm going to put it on, let me just make a little shift command in. So let's just say I pulled like this EG1 track out. And now it's like I'm not sure where this was in the session. So if I go over here and I change to spot mode and then I click on this clip again, it's going to open up spot dialog window. And then down at the bottom is a section that says original timestamp. Okay, cool, this is where this happens. So now when I hit that original timestamp, it puts the start thing there. And when I press OK, now it's going to move it to that location. So now this section should be over here with the, now I think it's like right where the kind of little speedy thing was, the little chug. So that is how you would get it to the original timestamp, is drag the clip out, go to spot mode, just click on the clip, hit original timestamp, hit OK, and then your clip is moved right there. And deleting a track and deleting a clip from this window does not delete the clip. So like, okay, I deleted the clip out of my section. That was like the EG 1015. So like when I go there, it's still sitting, I'd have to go in here and find it right there. It's still sitting right there. So then I can go in there and pull it back out and drag it out. So that is how you would put that back in the section where it needs to be. So now that we've talked about the clip section, we've talked about how to zoom in on clips, how to do their clip gain, do all this with hotkeys. Now another thing that makes this really easy to move, like, because let's say now I want to move these sections around. Oh, I need to get off spot mode because every time you're in spot mode and you try to click on something, it's going to bring up that dialog window and you won't actually be able to grab it and manually move it around. So let's say I have this section again over here and I want to, wonder what happened with this other thing here. That's weird. Let me just copy this one more time. So let's say I wanted to move this group around, but then I set it down and I'd move something else and I want to do this without them like being separated. Or let's say you actually had like a section where this is more likely to happen. Like if you had a section where you had gaps and like you have a section farther on. I guess that was hidden under there, weird. Where we had gaps like this and we're trying to move them around. And then the move part of that, if we do Option Command G, now this creates a group for those clips. So now I can just kind of move this whole clip as a group, even though I've chopped it up, moved it, made it done different stuff, and just makes it, and moved them around the session, just makes it way easier to move around. And then to get rid of that group, you do this, instead of Option Command G, you do Option Command U. and then it ungroups your clip group. So this is something that just, if you have a bunch of cuts and then you're moving those cuts around and you want them to all stay together, that's usually just, especially if there's a bunch of multiple tracks and things going on, it's usually really easy to just make a group, and then the group stays where it is, and then you can line up that group exactly how you want. Then you can ungroup it and go back in and do your normal processing that you've done before. So overall, that is the overview on clips. So we've gone over how to do kind of do a quick overview of everything that's in this lesson. So if y'all have any questions, I'm actually going to go, all these cuts that I just did right here, I'm going to get rid of them. And how I get rid of them is with Option Command H, which is heal. Oop, not Option Command H is my copy to send. I just need to do Command H. And that is heal on any clip group that you cut in, and then you decided you didn't want to cut it again if you have them highlighted, and then press Command H, it heals it, and it's just back to normal as a full clip. So that is our clips and groups. So last thing on clips is just we made sure we knew how to do the gain, the zooms, and how to do our crossfades, how to pull out a clip from when we don't have it, and how to create groups with those and move around. If y'all have any other questions about what we went over tonight, whether that be about groups, creating groups, using the group window, the group section, then using clips, making group clips, any of that, please ask in the chat down there. Otherwise, we're about at the end of these two things. So hopefully this lesson of going through groups and clips, although it's not like like the most funnest thing in the world, this is super, super useful stuff that's going to help you be able to move through your session and control your session with much more minimal movements, with allowing it to do exactly what you want it to do, and having full control of your session, which the more control you have your session when you're working with, trust me, artists notice when you have phenomenal control of Pro Tools and you control your session and you're moving super fast and smooth, because they'll sit there and they're like, man, these other engineers I've worked with don't do the same things you're doing whenever I'm sitting in sessions, or like I ask them to do something and it takes them like 3 minutes to do something that I do in like 20 seconds. And clients notice that, and that's going to make them come back to you. So the more that you can just get more familiar with these types of operations, and tonight just happened to be groups and clips, the more controlled, the better. And all these things too are going to help you with your mixes and help you with your final sound in getting everything set up how you want in Pro Tools. So thanks everybody for watching tonight. If you are enrolled, please go to the seminars tab on the MyDart TRCOA website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. If you need to book one-on-one time with me to answer questions or have any questions to prepare for a session, please text or email me and I can set up a time with you. If you aren't enrolled, please go to trcoa.edu if you want to find out more information. And also please post any subjects in the chat that you'd like to see in future live streams. And as always, guys, subscribe to our channel and we will see you all next time. Y'all have a great night. Later.